Oh, such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop Blinds.com right now and get up to 45% off select styles. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Following her year of slavery, Celaena Sardothien returns to Rithold as a guest of the palace and would-be champion with Dorian and Kale. Despite Celaena's wariness of the glass castle, the assassin finds herself pleased with her accommodations and the ready supply of books Dorian is willing to give her. But, unlike Dorian, many are unhappy with Celaena's presence, including the King of Adarlan, who does not hold back his ire regarding Dorian's choices of champion. Meanwhile, Celaena does her best to hide her fear of the king and her disdain about her missteps as a competitor on the eve of the competition's first trial.
Hey there, we're Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy, your book besties who take the novels you love seriously.
We embrace and respect modern fantasy, romantasy, and romance books written by women. And so it is in our nature to analyze these books as we would any other novel we might have dissected in school.
With our combined 13 years of literary academic training, we use our education to analyze and give voice to reasons you may love or hate today's popular books.
This is part 1 of this week's episode, where we'll cover chapter 7 through 10 of Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass novel. For a complete list of episodes and the chapter breakdowns, be sure to check out our Instagram at the handle Book Talk for Book Talk.
Before we dive in, let's talk about Spilt. Spoilers, perspective and interpretation, language, and themes.
Spoilers. While our discussion is about Throne of Glass, important context from the first 3 novels in the series will be discussed without spoiler warnings. That is specific to Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnights, and Heir of Fire. This is not a read-along for anyone who hasn't read at least these 3 books, and you will be spoiled from here on out. So please take this as your only spoiler warning. For all other spoilers beyond Heir of Fire and other SJM works, we will keep those to the breadcrumbs and broomsticks area of our episode.
Perspective and interpretation. What we discuss in this episode is strictly our personal interpretation of the text. We do not speak for Sarah J. Maas and in no way know her intentions for her books or characters. We also know our listeners have their own personal views and opinions, and we encourage you to share your thoughts with us because every perspective and interpretation is worth exploring.
Language. Even though I try to keep the swearing to a minimum for the sake of my mom, explicit language does occur, particularly Amy.
Themes. We also discuss some heavy subjects throughout the podcast that can include themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death. While we will do our best to give trigger warnings for the darker themes, we will discuss these topics when they are important to the text. Listener discretion is advised.
As always, we love keeping the conversation going because our listeners are really good at finding things we've overlooked or completely missed. You can share your interpretations of the text with us by posting on social media, tagging us in stories, sending us DMs, or submitting to the forum on our website. We also post more exclusive content and host live streams for our Patreon supporters. You can find us at patreon.com/Book Talk for Book Talk. Let's get into the episode.
This week, we ask ourselves the following question. In this set of chapters, we get a glimpse into the age of these characters and how they act. At this point, how much is the plot bolstered by or hurt by their age?
if at all.
if at all.
Yeah. Themes we're going to see in this section include perception and clothing as power.
We start with a grand performance in chapter 7. For those of you who haven't read the chapter recently, Kale, Dorian, and Selena are arriving to Rifthold, and trumpeters are signaling their arrival. They are going through the alabaster walls of Rifthold, but what's really lurking underneath is not this glittering white alabaster wall or the heralding of good news. Selena observes that underneath it all, the city smell is, quote, a foundation of filth, blood, and spoiled milk. And I love this visual image that we have the purity of the alabaster, but really underneath is this filth, blood, and spoiled milk. That's getting to the heart of Rifthold. And as we read more about the state of the place, the king, etc., we're going to learn just how reflective that is of everything around them. Selena herself is, quote, unchained, dressed, and painted. So she looks like she's a lady visitor, maybe Dorian's, someone he's courting, who knows.
Harlot, dare I say.
A harlot, dare we say. But despite that, it is all performative, and she is still very much a prisoner.
So I want to go back to that smell section, and I'm going to read the whole quote. And it says, quote, beneath the smell of spices and horses lay a foundation of filth, blood, and spoiled milk. The air held a hint of the salty waters of the Avery, different from the salt of Endovier. I really want to look at this moment because it feels like there's a lot of contradictions, right? She's talking about how beautiful it is, but at the same time, it smells horrible. And even here, the beneath the smell of horses and spices, although that alone sounds kind of gross to me. Not the spices, the horses. And but these are like positive things, right? And then underneath it, there's an uglier truth to the city. And I think that SJM is really using sensory here because you can imagine smelling this, right? We've all walked on a sidewalk and all of a sudden you're like, did someone pee here? And you know that smell very clearly. So you are immediately there and you can understand what I'm about to call her Elaine, Aelin. The reason why we don't call her Aelin is because she's Selena right now. So
Yeah.
I would be too confused. But you can see how Selena's really struggling with the warring senses, and so is the reader. Now they're writing, and Selena makes this note, quote, they followed the crown prince who, like Kale, was swathed in a red cape pinned over the left breast with a brooch fashioned after the royal seal. The prince wore a golden crown upon his neat hair, and she had to concede that he looked rather regal. The imagery here is the fact that Dorian is trying to look like his soldiers, right? He's trying to look like the people who follow him. And that's like a method of saying, look, I'm one of you guys. I'm fine. It's totally chill. I'm not a crown prince at all. But ultimately it's that uniformity. And at the end, like, he is not a soldier, right? And we're going to see an image later of just how different the soldiers' uniforms really are. But I do want to flag the red. And I know we talked about this in the previous episode of what red meant as a breadcrumb. Right now, we're going to look at the concept of red meaning a lot of other things. So
one other thing I want to add is if Dorian really wanted to look like the rest of the royal guard, he wouldn't wear his golden crown. And that's coming back to the theme of performance, right?
Yep.
His trying to blend in with the royal guard is performative. And in some ways, his wearing of the crown is performative as well, because he would rather probably not be the prince.
Yeah, the fact that she walks away with this being like, he looks regal versus like, wow, he looks like one of the people is,
says
like,
a lot.
It says a lot. As one of our themes, as we listed, is perception. And I'm just going to keep listing perception throughout the whole thing. And we're going to find our first moment of perception when it comes to Selena herself. Quote, she knew how she appeared seated atop a horse, like some prized lady being brought to this castle. So Selena only smiled at the women approaching Dorian, tossed her hair, and batted her eyelashes at the prince's back. So I'm going to look at this moment through the feminist lens, and then Amy's going to take over with the Marxist lens. So through the feminist lens, I can interpret this as Selena weaponizing the feminine against women. I feel like she's going to use that method quite a bit. But at the same time, in this moment, she's placing herself in competition. Like, she's really assuming, and her assumptions might be right. Like, her assumptions are probably right. We know they're right. But at the same time, like, she's the one who's adding that sense of competition. because of the the moment where she says, so Selena only smiled at the women approaching Dorian, who they're in this procession. Like, peasant women are the ones who are approaching him. Like, what competition are we really doing here? Are we really seeing here? Nothing against peasant women. I'm sure they're lovely. However, is this a survival technique? Like, is this her telling herself, like, you can't trust anyone? And maybe she sees the fact that women are a major threat, sometimes more so than the men. And then you get this moment between her and Kale here. Quote, "You look ridiculous," he said through his teeth, smiling at the crowd. She mirrored his expression. "They're ridiculous. You're doing the same thing as them." Like, she's mimicking these women. She's kind of antagonizing these women, which is something that she'll do throughout this whole episode. It's not great. However, this is an example of how she's very young.
She is very 18.
God, yes. Happy to not be that age again.
Seriously.
I do want to give a heads up to the listener. If our voice is raspy and they're like, wow, their vocal fry sucks, I woke up like 45 minutes ago.
It is still morning.
It's still morning. I haven't talked to anyone. This is the first time I'm using my voice. Let's continue.
So, looking at this scene through the Marxist lens, Selena is being dragged through the streets or paraded through the streets like the spoils of war. She is the conquest that has been won and is now being shown off by the prince as he returns home. So it does come across to me that maybe instead of, now I agree with Jack, there is definitely some competition between women throughout this episode, and it is less desirable for us than it might be for a young author or reader. I choose to try to see this moment maybe as an opportunity for Selena to play act and blend in with the women as a defense mechanism, because knowing the whole series, and this is not necessarily a spoiler, Selena hasn't had a lot of female friends up until this point.
Yeah.
And she's not been brought up in a place where she knows how to act like a lot of other women, whether they're in royal places, whether they're in the court or in, just the average citizen. And so she doesn't know how to interact with them. She doesn't know how to look like them. So
No.
her mimicking them is her way, I think, of an assassin trying to blend in.
I balance with that too. Like, I kind of went back and forth of asking myself how much of this is her putting on an act for those around her. And I say yes, partially, and at the same time I'm like, baby, you're just a young baby. You're just However, I will say SJM, as we've analyzed her other works, isn't great at female friendship.
Yeah.
She eventually adds more of them into her later series. I'd say that probably the best example will be Silver Flames. Even with Crescent City, I don't think she does a great job. Actually, we talk about how it's not a great job of showing female friendship. Yeah, go ahead.
I will say she gets better at female friendship in this series in the later books.
Yeah, but I think it's something that she, as an author, we've spotted. She really has to warm up to it. Like, her female characters tend to start off alone.
Yeah.
From women.
Yep. I also want to talk about Kale's reaction, because when he pinches her and tells her she looks ridiculous, two questions popped up in my mind. Is he jealous of Selena's intentions towards Dorian? Because we know, and I think we already start to see in this set of chapters, how Kale is starting to become interested in Selena.
Yeah.
Or is it in his best interest and in Dorian's best interest for Selena to not be associated with Dorian as much as possible, because she's tainted. She's an assassin. She, is guilty of crime. So maybe, on the other hand, he doesn't want to taint Dorian's image, especially if people find out that she is in fact Selena Sardothian.
So at this point in the book, I'm going to choose to believe that he actually is seeing her as an assassin. He's seeing her as a threat. And the moment that it changes, such a man thing, is when she gets pretty.
Yeah.
And you see that moment change. We're going to talk about how he's laughing with her. We're going to talk about how he admits that she's pretty, which is also a really weird thing for kind of a stickler to do. Anyway, but at this point, I like to think he is just being a good captain of the guard.
Yeah. And he's just like, stop drawing attention to yourself.
Yeah.
So as the royal caravan travels to the palace, they pass a bunch of shops. And we get this thought from Selena's perspective. Quote, "The glass storefronts were nearly invisible beyond the crowd, but a ravenous sort of hunger arose in her as they passed shop after shop. Each window displayed dresses and tunics, which stood proudly behind lines of sparkling jewelry and broad-rimmed hats, clumped together like a bouquet of flowers." We're seeing here something I typically associate with power, which is hunger for food. Now we're seeing hunger associated with clothing, which I'm going to choose to interpret for Selena is a hunger for power. She finds comfort, she finds herself in clothing, and that in and of itself is powerful. However, at this moment, that source of power is out of Selena's grasp, which unfortunately she needs to be successful in this coming competition. She is the lowest of her lows. And we're going to see later how Dorian makes a comment about how she's kind of fattened up, but 2 weeks of food is not sufficient to make up for a year of slavery.
Right? It's like, you fattened up. Can't wait for us to talk about that quote. It's like, sir, I don't care if I am on the verge of death. You do not say that to me.
You do not say no.
So I want to lean a little bit more back into that quote, the fact that she is hungry for these really pretty clothing. And I agree that there is this hunger for power because there is a hunger for the feminine. And just as a reminder, I like to remind for the first early episode so that people remember that I am talking about this in a gender hetero norm, very stereotypical masculine feminine lens. Does not reflect how I believe. Back to our regular schedule program. So she's hungry for this feminine. And I think there's a lot to that because she wants to be something that she's not. Right now, she is an assassin, right? Not that assassins can't be feminine, but at the same time, kind of no, because we're going to find out that she's the only woman amongst all of these competitors. So she wants to be this person that she isn't because circumstances have taken over and redefined her. Those circumstances being what's his face who adopted her to be an assassin. She did not get a say in that. She was that identity has been thrusted onto her, which sucks. Now, you can't talk about being hungry for something without saying that you've been starved for it. So we're seeing that she's hungry for the feminine because she's been starved of the feminine. And I believe that she is going to see how useful dresses feminine is part of the battle when it comes to the battle against women and the manipulation of man.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it also makes sense then why, in my mind, she is so antagonistic towards other women because they already possess the feminine that she's been deprived of.
Yeah. She hates women right now.
Yeah. And I mean, starving in some minds is not very feminine. So it makes sense. It doesn't mean I agree with it, but
We can understand her mentality.
Yes. Now, as they're traveling to the palace, Selena sees a bunch of different sorts of people at the piers in Rifthold, and that includes a lot of different slaves. And in this moment, Selena has this moment of like anxiety where she doesn't want to be associated with the royals, with the guards that she's traveling with, because she understands from an outside perspective, she is no better than the masters who keep the slaves. She, in this moment, becomes ashamed of the performance and being present with the prince and thinks, quote, "She wanted to leap from her horse and run to them, or to simply scream that she wasn't a part of the prince's court, that she had no hand in bringing them here, chained and starved and beaten, that she had worked and bled with them, with their families and friends. She was not like these monsters that destroyed everything."
I really feel for her, obviously, because she was part of this identity. She was a slave, not to undermine the experience that she went through. She was a slave for 1 year. Now, you can argue her being an assassin was also her being a slave of a different kind. But, that's a slave of a different kind. That's not a straight up slave. And she wants to separate herself. She wants to put herself in the role of other.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think that Selena is a very empathetic person. I think that she went through something absolutely horrible, but I also think to assume that you're not assume, but kind of take on their identity completely isn't I don't want to say it's the wrong move. No, it is the wrong move, but it is like something to note, right? I don't want this to be we keep insulting and harping on an 18-year-old character. That's not what we're doing. I think that it's just important to see that she's missing the part where she is still different from them. And the reason why it's important to say that she's still missing the part where she's different from them, because once she accepts that she's different from them, that's when she's like, ah, I'm a princess, right? So right now she sees her identity here. And that's because she cares. She's a very compassionate individual. And she mentions how she freed almost 200 slaves from the pirate lord. Quote, freeing slaves because she couldn't free her family or people. Now that speaks a lot, right? That speaks to the fact that her people, her homeland, her everything has been absolutely gone and destroyed. So this is also viewed as a misplaced sense of justice too.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to say again, it's not misplaced because, these slaves need to be free. That's important, but it's because she couldn't do one thing is why she's embracing this.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think this is another moment where we have to go back to the age of Selena. She is 18 years old. She obviously has a lot of empathy
Mhm.
and sympathy for the slaves that she's seeing in this moment. She's not able to clearly articulate
Yeah.
her feelings right now. The easiest thing to then rely on is to say, I am one of you. As an 18-year-old, I was not very articulate. I was not
Your
articulate
frontal
about my
lobe wasn't
feelings.
done. Your frontal lobe was not done. I don't think at
No.
18 you understand you're different.
Yeah. 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 And especially since Selena's background, she has been in various forms of quote unquote enslavement, and she will continue when she going into this competition and being the
Mhm.
king's champion. I think at the heart of it, she understands the longing for freedom.
Yes.
And that's the core of her sentiment of I am trapped like you are, and I long for your freedom as well as mine.
Please don't confuse me with these monsters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So at this point, they're getting closer to the gate, and Selena sees the guards. Quote, a dozen guards flanked the cobblestone path through the palace gates. Each wore a red cape. Their armor, while tarnished, was well crafted from copper and leather. And remember, Dorian is similar to them, right? He's wearing, in theory, a very similar outfit, right? He's wearing the gold, he's wearing a red cape, but now we're seeing that the soldiers are tarnished. They are not like Dorian, they are different. And coming back to this idea where Selena isn't like the slaves, she is different. Dorian is not like his soldiers, he is different. And they're more worked, right? They've actually been put to the effort of running the kingdom. And I think that's also there's a subtext there that shows what keeps this kingdom alive. Slaves
Mm-hmm.
and soldiers who work so hard their uniforms are tarnished, who
Yeah.
their uniforms are so unimportant they become tarnished. Those are the ones that keep this system going. And again, red, it's a big theme.
I am going to steal Jack's thunder a little bit, and I apologize.
Oh,
Jack is going to make an excellent point later that Dorian and Selena are mirrors of each other. And I actually see it here in this moment that I didn't see prior
yeah.
to us taking our notes, that they both are trying to appeal to people they identify with, quote
Yeah.
unquote.
Yeah. No,
Do,
go for
do
it. No, keep going. I know I was setting this up. No, you're doing great. Keep going. But yes, that is so this was like set up for all those. But yeah, I
Oh,
think you
okay.
just no, just
No, no,
good
no.
keep going.
I didn't read your notes very closely, so
No,
I
no,
don't.
I don't mention it until later chapters. So I think it's good to just
Okay. So
let's put it out there.
this is just kind of the taster, the appetizer
Yeah.
for the really more obvious, more new. This is a more
In your
nuanced
face.
view.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, of how both Dorian and Selena want to appeal to a certain group of people from whom they are actually not very much alike.
And you know what? Let's just put the good stuff up front. And because of this, that's why you're going to see a sense of intimacy between the two. The two of them are going to see themselves as the other, and you're going to get different points both together and separate where you have that interpretate that they're interpreting themselves as the other, and you can understand why they built this intimacy in this first book.
Which is what Jack is going to explore later in this episode, because
You're going to hear me saying it over and over. So,
it's a chef's kiss
oh my
observation.
God, is this our first chef's kiss of the
It
season?
is.
Wow. And it comes from
Because
me.
I didn't think about it until I read your notes. So,
Damn.
yeah, I should have.
Gotcha. Now, at this point, they are going through the archway and they're actually, getting into the castle area. Quote, beyond the archway sloped a road lined with trees of gold and silver. Glass lampposts sprouted up between the hedges bordering the path. The sounds of the city vanished as they passed under the arch, this one made of sparkling glass. And then the castle rose before them. Archways are, like we said in the last episode, a really big shift, a moment of seeing how Selena's world is shifting. And the fact that it's also a glass archway speaks volumes, because Selena makes it very clear that she's afraid of this glass castle. She hates the glass. She hates being this high up. So of course the arch would then be made of glass. I also think that it's important to note that there's an immediate lack of sound practically when they get through the arch, and it's to show the different world. Everything that she's seen, the blood, the slavery, the tarnished soldiers, that's out there. The reality is out there. She is now entering a world of non-reality. And I think that, these arches at the beginning of this book are going to be more obvious. It's the same way that the representation of red is going to be a little bit more obvious and on the nose. I don't fault that. I think this is good. I think that you're going to see in later books that SJM writes, they're a bit more subtle. You can look at it more closely, but right now, it might seem obvious, but that's fine. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you don't know to look for it, it's not obvious. But if
Yes.
you know to look for it, you're like, oh, I know what's happening here.
Check mark. There it is.
Yeah.
So as I said, Selena is terrified about being in a glass castle. Quote, she wasn't afraid of heights, but the thought of being so high up with nothing but glass to protect her made her stomach clench. And, there's that phrase of, don't live in a glass house because people throw stones at it, something like that. What is that? What is the meaning of that? I can't remember. Is it like, don't put your shit out there, otherwise people will throw things at you?
Yeah, I think.
Don't throw stones at glass castles. Or glass homes, no.
Well, let me look it up. But I think I know I have my interpretation, and
Okay, it says don't throw stones in a glass house. How would I always think it was out like at one? I mean, you shouldn't do that either. But basically, it's meant to show that people should not criticize others for faults that they also have.
It's like the religious phrase, he who casts the first stone.
Oh, I was thinking like pot and kettles. Kettle calling the pot black.
Yeah. It's the same idea. Idea.
Take your judgy shit elsewhere is
exactly.
the moral of that story.
Exactly.
And, there's, the where that comes from is the living in a glass castle, right? In a glass house. So same thing, right? There's a lot of don't judge, don't look at the outside when you should be looking at the inside.
Mm-hmm.
It also kind of shows that there's this illusion that there's nothing to hide because of how open it is. Hey, it's a glass castle. Everyone can look inside. But at the same time, it hides absolutely everything, which is similar to Selena, you can argue. It looks like she's putting everything out there, but there's a lot that she keeps inside.
Which makes sense why she says it multiple times, and I think I bring it up again later. She really hates this idea of being in a glass castle.
Yeah, not a fan.
And it makes sense for someone who has spent the majority of their life hiding, that they would hate being put on display in a way that doesn't necessarily allow them to hide or sneak around the way they want.
And for someone who saw their own castle be burned and their own life destroyed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how easily this one can fall apart too.
Yep, exactly. So Dorian decides at this point to start being charming. And it feels like a complete 180 from last week's episode. When Selena tells him she doesn't want to be in any part of the glass castle. He chuckles and he says, quote, "You're like me. Thank the gods I gave you rooms in the stone castle. I'd hate for you to be uncomfortable." Now, I think that we're going to see moments where Dorian is trying to make a connection to Selena. And this is one of those moments where he's like, "Oh, we're the same." The question for me becomes, is this a genuine search for connection because he can now be himself? He's posturing less because he's not being watched by a bunch of guards or Duke Parrington. Or is there something else going on?
I think it comes back to the concept of them mirroring one another, because we're going to see that Selena uses charm as a weapon. And we get right off the bat that Dorian uses charm as a weapon too. So this is a moment of mirroring, and sometimes it works on her. Sometimes I think she lets Dorian think that it works on her. And there's other times where it just doesn't work at all. And I think she kind of sometimes gets a little thrown off of saying, "Excuse me, sir, you will not do that." I remember in college I worked at a frozen yogurt shop, and I was in Scottsdale, and that's where like a lot of the professional athletes come, and baseball players were the absolute worst. They would come in and just try to get free shit all the time, and they would throw this charming smile at me, and I remember thinking, "Excuse me, that's my move to get free shit. You do not get to do that to me." So I think that Selena kind of has a similar vibe there.
Yeah, you can't outcharm me, sir. Like,
But he kind of does.
yeah, yeah. So in this same conversation, Dorian then comments on Selena's appearance, and it's kind of really out of the blue. And I
It
have to,
is. It
it's
is.
so out of the blue. And I have to ask myself, is SJM trying to get this information to the reader through dialogue rather than Selena making the observation herself? And my guess is yes, because this is what he says after saying, "Oh, thank God, we're the same. We're both going to be staying in the stone castle." Quote, "Well, you fatten up a bit and your skin has some color now. Welcome to my home, Selena Sardathian." Like, WTF, those are not two thoughts that go together.
I like everything is like coming out. I'm just trying to imagine a guy like, I don't know, just being, "Hey, so you plumped up a little bit. Come on in." I think that this is where you can see her progression as a writer. Let's
Mhm.
take a beat and think about Akatar. At one point, this isn't a spoiler. At one point, Farah, who is starving, looks at her body and thinks, "Wow, I've changed. Things that were so sunken and hollow now have filled out." Now,
Mhm.
that is a moment that, one, it takes a while. Like we said, it doesn't happen over a couple weeks.
Mhm.
Two, it was a moment that was Farah's to own. It was a
Mhm.
moment for her to be surprised at her own growth and stability that she
Mhm.
experienced. This, I agree, feels much more like a tell not show moment, and it takes away from Selena. I think this also sets us up for a moment where I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but Caltaine, when we see her, Selena will notice, "Ugh, her waist is so thin. Is it like, I think it's only 19 inches around, or even 16?" It's some ridiculous number of, she's just so thin. That Selena kind of implying that she's not that thin
Mhm.
when she just got out of being a slave for a
Mm,
year. So
right.
I find this to be a product of the times when it comes to writing, where we are trying to get the main heroine to be relatable. Of, this other woman, she's so skinny, but I'm not so skinny, and this is
Mhm.
evidence. She's plumped up, she's flattened up. That's why she doesn't have a 19-inch waist. There's that. But I also want to look at the moment, the fact that Dorian goes from, you fattened up a little bit, to "Welcome home."
Yeah.
And this is a form of control, right? Dorian is the one who's in control of her health. He took her out of prison, he fed her, he clothed her. He's the one who is in control of her body. So she only fattened up because he deemed it so. And then there's the control of the full use of her name, Selena Sardathian. He's about to take that away. He's about to give
Mhm.
her a whole other identity. So he's dangling this carrot of who she is before he removes that. And then it's also, "Welcome to my home, Selena
Mhm.
Sardathian." You are now entering my area to which I am clothing you, feeding you, housing you, and removing your identity. So I agree it's out of nowhere, but let's take a moment to analyze this little text, and I think that it kind of covers a bit here.
No, I think that's a great point, and I do think what you've talked about lends itself well to his prior comment of like, "Oh, good thing I put you in the stone castle."
Yeah.
All the good things you're about to receive, including your health, your security, your
Uh-huh.
clothing, that is all thanks to me, Dorian.
Yeah.
That is the
Well,
message he's giving.
I as someone who does similar messages, I understand that of you got this because of me. I mean, at one point he's even going to say, aren't you impressed with the apartments I got you?
Mhm, mhm.
He just wants the credit.
Yeah,
But that's very much him, and I think in this chapter or in this episode you're going to see a lot of great starting points for him.
yeah,
And it's important to flag these starting points because we'll see the growth in future episodes and books.
yep.
So you have Dorian who lays on the charm really heavy to Selena, and then he continues to lay the charm on for everyone. He's a good-looking guy, that's fine. Quote, he winked at her. She hid her face behind a lace fan as she continued to walk. We have Dorian who is out here charming everyone, weaponizing charm to everyone, keeping all the women, absolutely dazed. And at the same time, he's kind of parading that in front of Selena, almost saying, hey, anything I do for you isn't of value. It's not going to be special to you.
Mhm, mhm.
Did you see the Instagram reel I sent you this last night?
No.
Look at it real fast.
Okay.
It's a example of someone saying, this is what Dorian looks like, and I could not agree more. I know we say a stupid good-looking guy with black hair and blue eyes, but
Yep. 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 I completely agree.
yeah, I mean, just too good looking for his own
Yeah.
good.
And when we get to the scene where Dorian and his father are one-on-one, it's the second scene we see Dorian in. I think it's going to explain a lot of why he is this way.
Agreed, agreed. So now we're going to see Selena's apartments, and it's her apartment, straight up apartment, better than any apartment you and I have lived in.
Mm.
And she has a bathing room, a bedroom, a dressing room, a dining room, a game room, and it is fancy. Quote, each room was furnished in gold and crimson. Her bedroom was decorated with a giant tapestry along one wall, with couches of deep cushioned chairs scattered in a tasteful manner. We're getting more red, and red is an invasion. Red is going to be associated with the royal family, with Dorian's father. Just like everything else, red is seeping into this home.
It really reminds me of the royal apartments in Versailles, the Palace of Versailles. Remember
Yeah.
when we went? Because each individual royal, each princess, each, whomever, they've got these multiple grand
Yeah.
flamboyant rooms. And it's very pretty, but the crimson is a little overpowering.
Can I just say, maybe I'll take this out, but there was like one of my favorite all-time Amy moments was when we were in the Palace of Versailles. Do you know what I'm going to say?
No, I can't remember.
We were in the Palace of Versailles, and we were walking, and there was, the royal family depicted as different kind of gods of war, right? Mars
Mhm,
and
mhm.
everything. And I remember you looking up and just kind of, take a moment. You look at me and you say, you know what? You can really tell they're not a conquering nation. We're like, they never really won a good war.
Man, that was 5.5 years ago. I don't remember me saying
I
that. I'm really glad you
I
do.
think about it a lot. You can really tell they never won a major war here.
Keep it in. I love it.
Yeah.
Now that Selena's in her apartment, she's alone in her bedroom, we see her assassin side and her survival instincts kick in. This is one of the good show don't tell moments, I think, on SJM's part, because it allows us to learn more about Selena and her need for constant plotting and seizing of opportunities.
Yep.
She counts the windows, the exits, the guards posted at the door, the window, the balcony, and she knows what weapon each of them have, which is very top tier observational skills. Good job.
Yeah.
She also figures out how she would fight if she needed to escape. Like if she had to jump out the balcony, how would she fight the guards down there, etc. She then looks for items that she could use as a weapon. And what ends up happening is they've taken out basically everything that they can think of as a weapon. So what she does is she makes a shank out of broken bone, hairpins, and thread. Quote, "Well, it wasn't a knife, but clustered together like that, the jagged points of the broken pins could do some damage. It would certainly hurt if she jammed it into a guard's neck and disabled him long enough for her to grab his weapons." It establishes in this moment just how resourceful Selena can be. She's creating scraps of power for herself when the tools are available to her, even tools that no one else would assume could contain power.
And what are these tools that no one's assuming has power? They're for women. These
Mhm.
are items that women use. These are feminine products. And I mean, they're not tampons and pads, but they're, you know, they're a different type of feminine products. And it shows that Selena is capable of embracing the feminine, of using it as a weapon and to manipulate it. And, like it's a great, like you said, it's a great show, not tell.
Mhm. Mhm. I do find following this a curious moment. She goes into the game room where, quote, "she beheld the billiards cues along the far wall of the gaming room in her suite and grinned. Kale wasn't nearly as smart as he thought he was." Now, why the hell would Kale overlook billiards cues? And the only explanation I could come up with is that billiards is a proper, quote unquote, proper sport that the privileged get to play.
Yeah.
The privileged, therefore, cannot recognize a billiards cue usefulness outside of the game.
I think that's a great interpretation. And I just want to, any new listeners, want to show how we break down things in two different ways and how two things can be true. I think that it's a good example. I think it's a good interpretation of it. I think it's also a good example of SJM as a new author in this point needing to have something there in order to bring it back later. Because there's going
Mm,
to be a scene of Selena playing with, can't remember who, Dorian or Kale, one of the two.
I think it's
And
Dorian.
yeah, like I think so too. And they're having this like good conversation. And SJM needs to have that something there to clue into it. So
Mm-hmm.
two things could be true. I think this is a great interpretation. Whether that was SJM's intention doesn't matter. That's not how analyzing literature works. We kind of just we analyze.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to flag that I feel like this is her being a new author overlooking a very well, why isn't this a weapon moment? Because she's going to need it later.
Yeah, yeah. And she explains it away through Selena's point of view that, oh, Kale's just dumb.
Exactly. When he's not.
He's not. And yeah, and she needs it there for convenience because it's a it becomes a plot device for her later.
Yeah. Yep. So once Selena has kind of settled into her apartments, people come, servants come, and they are, giving her dresses. They're tailoring dresses to her, and she doesn't like it. Quote, she hated most of them. A few caught her attention, but when she tried to recommend specific styles that flattered her, she received only the wave of a hand and a curl of the lip. Going to look at this through the feminist lens. It's another form of control. This time, it's a control of her ability to seduce. And that's going to be a concern that people will bring
Mm.
up a couple times. I feel weird saying, I know these are 18-year-olds, but like that is a theme here is, well, Dorian can't keep it in his pants and you're just so attractive and you're his harlot. And it's a reminder that, hey, people are like, he's going to try to hook up with you. Other people are going to try to hook up with you. So let's just try to make you as unflattering as possible.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that's a great interpretation. So, from the Marxist lens, I interpret this a little similar but different.
Yeah.
So, if we see clothing as a source of power for Selena, the power is not for her to control. She's not allowed to suggest fabrics or styles that flatter her that would bolster her power internally. It's like, in my mind, being given a weapon you haven't trained for, or that's the wrong size for your body type.
Uh-huh.
It might cause a lack of balance. Like a petite woman carrying a large broadsword might be harder for her to manage.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same idea. And I point that out because we're going to see a few moments where Selena is ill prepared for what's coming. And I think this is kind of the first signal of that happening.
There's also kind of a contradiction to it too, because she says these are not flattering, these are her best picks, but at the same time, she's going to be, you're so beautiful. This looks great on you, you know?
Mhm,
So it's a
mhm.
little,
Yeah.
eh.
Yeah. Well, I will say though, when we get to some of the dress descriptions, I'm like, WTF is going
I
on?
have a great reason for that, and it's going to blow your mind. So
Okay, I'm excited.
brace yourself. Don't you dare look at the notes.
I'm not looking, but can I take a sip?
Absolutely.
Excuse us while we hydrate and you listen to this ad. This episode is sponsored by Manscaped, the brand trusted by over 11 million men worldwide for their face and body trimmers, hygiene essentials, and premium boxers. If so many men swear by them, you can bet your Valentine will too.
The Handyman Rocket Man is a sleek, powerful, compact face shaver that helps guys ditch the mess. Honestly, why get into a fight this Valentine's Day? Make that bathroom clean. Plus, since it's compact, it's easy to travel with, so your man can have that clean shave during your romantic weekend getaway.
The Handyman has a unique dual blade system which features both a standard foil shaver and a long hair trimming blade, and comes equipped with skin-safe technology to help reduce nicks and cuts so that he looks handsome for you on date night. So give him the gift of grooming this Valentine's Day. Get 20% off plus free shipping with code BOOKTALK, that's BOOKTALK, at manscaped.com.
That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code BOOKTALK, BOOKTALK, at manscaped.com. That way, you both can look great this Valentine's Day, because we already know you're going to.
My new focus in life and in my wardrobe is quiet luxury. The things that are nice, that make me feel good, but I know are worth the money that I spent on it without being boisterous.
I've definitely noticed that I've been spending more time on elevating what I'm purchasing, and some of my favorite go-to items have been from Quince. That's because they offer a range of high-quality items, but with prices that are within reach and very reasonable.
They have 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50 and washable silk tops and dresses that I love to wear to work.
Quince items are usually priced between 50 to 80% less than other similar brands.
They work with top factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes and cut out the middleman in the process.
One of my all-time favorite cardigans is actually from Quince, and every time I wear it, I always get compliments of how cozy and how soft it is.
My favorite Quince item is this button-up washable silk blouse that I wear to work, and what I love about it is it's so versatile. I can pair it with a cardigan, I can wear it on its own, I can wear it with a blazer, and it always makes me feel good about myself.
Give yourself the luxury gift you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns.
That's QUINCE.com/booktalk to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK.
This episode is brought to you by Nerds Gummy Clusters, the sweet treat that always elevates the vibe. With a sweet gummy surrounded with tangy, crunchy nerds, every bite of Nerds Gummy Clusters brings you a whole new world of flavor. Whether it's game night, on the way to a concert, or kicking back with your crew, unleash your senses with Nerds Gummy Clusters.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Like I said, there's a lot of effort into making Selena look good, which is funny because they're so worried about her looking good, but at the same time, they need to make her look good. It shows that Selena knows what she was talking about when she said that she has the right features and knows how to enhance them. Quote, after nearly 2 hours of pampering, trimming her hair, shaping her nails, and scraping away the calluses on her feet and hands, Selena grinned at the mirror in the dressing room. She now knows, I I'm hot again. Like it's that feeling of like once you get everything done, and it's like when you dye your hair and you're kind of thinking, oh, well, I have fresh hair. We need to go
Yeah.
out. Every
Yeah.
time I get my hair done, it's always, Amy, we're going to the bar.
Yeah.
I need to be seen. Going to Target is not enough of being seen. The world needs to see my hair. It's the effort of appearance and of how people perceive her. This is now going to be her battle. How will people look at her and what will they take away from that? So perception and appearance are going to go hand in hand. I hope people, I'm wondering if people need to see how I mean perception and appearance. So perception is how people view something,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a good example of that would be, I don't know, if someone was walking around in a bubblegum pink dress or something, and that's how someone appears, and you're going to perceive them and think, oh, well, they're super vapid, they don't know anything, but in actuality they are a PhD scholar in Gothic or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you just don't know what someone is going to, you're perceiving them in a certain way.
Yeah.
And Selena knows that the best way to manipulate perception is appearance.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to look into her own, to one of the first dresses that we see on her. Quote, "Only in the capital could servants have done such fine work. She looked spectacular, utterly and completely spectacular. She wore a dress with skirts and long sleeves of white, streaked and spotted with orchid purple. The indigo bodice was bordered with a thin line of gold, and an ice white cape hung from her shoulders. Her hair, half up and twisted with a fuchsia ribbon, fell in loose waves, but her smile faltered as she remembered why exactly she was here. I want to point out the colors: white, purple, blue, gold. I'm just pointing that out because the main colors we're going to see later are going to be red, which is this modern royal household, and then green and silver, which is for Terrason. And she can't really enjoy the moment because of how much of a reminder it really is of why she, like she said, of why she's there. However, again, she just said the fabric doesn't look good on her, so why is she saying she looks spectacular? I think she's just being pouty.
Yeah.
Initially.
Well, and it's a lot of clashing colors, but it's white, purple, blue, gold, fuchsia. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
I want to see the reference photos of the dresses
I think
SJM
there
is
used to be a
imagining.
Pinterest board. I think SJM used to have Pinterest boards for her books.
Yeah, I think that's right. I want to see the reference photo because I
agree.
can't imagine this.
The
right
fuchsia is
now.
what throws me.
Yeah.
That's what does it for me.
Yeah, agreed. Despite having had this Princess Diaries moment where she's been transformed in a moment, Selena can't really enjoy what's going on or her cleaned up appearance, as Jack mentioned. Quote, "Her smile faltered as she remembered why exactly she was here. The king's champion indeed. She looked more like the king's lapdog." Now, what do we think of when we think of a lapdog? A servant, someone who's obedient, someone who just follows orders blindly. And this is a reminder for us that despite the joy she may feel in her grand apartments, in the way that she looks, she still has traded one prison for another. She just happens to maybe like this prison a little bit more, or it benefits her a little bit more. However, at the same time, she also demeans herself. She is reducing herself to no longer human, but a dog that obeys orders, which indicates the fact that she does, in fact, dislike this situation, no matter how it's good for her.
Yeah. I mean, and it's the fact that, a lapdog is, it's a prissy dog, it's not some kind of guard dog, and it's a pet to be owned. So she recognizes that she's not even a guard dog level yet. She's just this pretty little dog that's small and fits on your lap.
Yeah.
So now we're going to meet Philippa. And, we love Philippa. She's great, and she's not afraid of Selena. So let's take a note of this moment. And Philippa says to Selena, "Or people just think that you're another lady friend of the prince." Another? That's my interpretation of Selena being shocked. The assumption of women and the value that they bring to the role. I think that some of Philippa's initial comments are very interesting and very telling. And, they're funny, but I think it's hidden. The funny is hiding kind of darker truths there that Philippa is very aware of. I just want to say that, Philippa's saying lady friend. but it's an undertone. It's a nicer way of saying harlot. I just want to say she's not
Right,
mad at
right,
it now. She's confused, but she's not
right.
throw a potted plant at her mad.
Correct.
You'll understand what we're saying in a minute. Selena, though, underestimates Philippa. Quote, why send such a soft woman to serve her? She'd overpower her in a heartbeat. That's because Selena at this point is only thinking brute strength, which is so confusing because, well, no, actually, it's not confusing. Now I'm analyzing as I talk because Philippa isn't competition.
Mhm,
Philippa isn't another young lady who's trying to get Dorian's attention. So I think that at this point, Selena doesn't compute of
mhm,
how to battle with Philippa other than brute strength. So she can't charm her. She can't out feminine beauty her. So what can she do? Well, she can, beat her ass up. She's out here playing checkers. She's not there playing chess just yet. She's playing tic-tac-toe. She's not even playing checkers. We also get this exchange here where Selena says, are you mad I'm an assassin, not some court idiot? And, because of course that's where it's like, I have an opinion. I'm difficult. You're
mm,
just mad at that. And Philippa says, you're still a woman. And so long as you're under my charge, you'll act like one, or word help me. Philippa has, you could say, reduced her identity to being just a woman. Or you could say Philippa understands that in this court, her identity is just a woman.
mhm,
Two
mhm.
things happening, two things can be true. And then the question comes to be, is being a woman an identity? Is that even a way to define yourself? Or can you have another identity before being a woman? And I think that Kaltain is going to be a great example of someone who understands the court and how things work there and then defines herself as woman first.
Mhm, mhm.
And woman in this case being manipulated, controlled, abused.
Yeah, yeah. I love this scene between Selena and Philippa because we get this battle of wills that Selena was not prepared for. She, especially since Philippa knows her identity as Selena Sardathian, Philippa should be cowering in a corner, not telling her she doesn't look good as a woman.
Yeah.
So I think what's happening here, and we saw it kind of foreshadowed by the Taylor scene, on one hand, Selena does not have the weapons in her arsenal that make her intimidating.
Yep.
I think that's what we're seeing in this interaction. At the same time, to your point, Jack, Selena is not playing the game that Philippa is playing. And Philippa is actually trying to teach her, in my mind, that she has to play two games simultaneously. She is going to be competing with men, but she also has to play the game of the court as a woman because that is how people perceive her.
Yeah.
And Selena is not prepared for the courtly competition. And quite frankly, she's not really prepared for the physical competition either. So Selena's just kind of shit out of luck, but Philip is there to try to get her to where she needs to be. And Selena's not on board because she wasn't necessarily mentally prepared that that was a fight she was going to have to undertake.
Which is also such an fun thing to think about is the fact fun. I was just trying to find another way to say interesting. So someone might be like, your thought isn't fun, Jack. This is actually depressing. Uh it's fun to think about the fact that Selena would have grown up in this environment
Mhm.
if her home hadn't been torn apart. Now, I think we make it clear that Terrason isn't as petty or isn't, as much more magical than this place, but the king kind of like sets the tone for the court. So,
Mhm.
it wouldn't have been this aggressive. However, court is court.
Mhm.
They're parading themselves around. They're trying to get attention. And there's this other reality of in a parallel universe, this is how she would have grown up.
Exactly.
And it also reflects on Philippa. She's
Yeah.
saying like, hey, this is my work I'm putting out here.
Yep. Yep.
Follow it.
And Philippa says something to that effect later on of
Yeah.
like, I'd rather you cut off my head than mess up your appearance right now, or something
Yeah.
to that effect. And yeah, I mean, whatever Selena does, it's going to be Philippa who gets chewed out by the prince
Yeah.
or whoever if a mistake takes place.
Yep. Now, here's another moment and quote between the two. Quote, don't make such a face, Philippa called over her shoulder. It squashes that little nose of yours. Once again, it's about what you're out outward appearances and the fact that that's popular, and it's what's more important. Philip is very aware of how pretty Selena is,
Mm-hmm.
and she wants to make Selena as pretty as possible because she wants to give Selena the tools
Mm-hmm.
of battle in this court. You know, not the best life would suck. I scrunch up my nose all the time when I'm unhappy.
I do too. I scrunch my nose when I laugh. I scrunch my nose when I'm mad.
We wouldn't thrive here.
No, we would not. I also don't have a little nose.
I have a clogged nose. I would.
We then shift to Dorian's point of view. And like I said earlier, this is only the second time that we're in Dorian's point of view, and that's going to be important, but I'll make that point later. This is also the second instance where SJM clues us into the fact that eyes are important. In last week's episode, we talked about how Dorian comments on Selena's quote unquote remarkable eyes. Here we get a description of Dorian's eyes. Quote, "And there was the matter of Dorian's sapphire eyes. Not even his mother had his eyes. No one knew where they came from." Now, we know that this is a theme that SJM continues in her other series, in her other books, that if there is something spectacular or different about a person's eyes, that is a very telling feature. We just don't happen to know yet what that means here.
You know, his eyes, they're obviously, you know, kind of like a breadcrumb that he's different and everything. But I also want to point out that there's this moment of Dorian feeling different from his family.
Mhm.
Quote, "Sometimes Dorian forgot how little he looked like his father. It was his younger brother, Holland, who took after the king." This is Dorian separating himself. This is Dorian saying, I am different. I do not fit in here. I am other. Just
Yeah.
like someone else that we see.
Which-
Selena.
Great point. We also learn just how quickly Dorian does not get along with his father, and his father, in turn, disdains Dorian. Quote, "If only his father knew that he hadn't just ventured to find a champion to win gold, but also to get away from him for as long as he could manage." This implies that Dorian feels trapped in his own way, trapped by his father, by his expectations. It does make me wonder, was Selena Sardathian the furthest away option that he thought was a reasonable champion, and that was his only reason for picking her?
He's like, you're far. That'll
Yeah.
do.
It'll take me 2 months to get to you and
Yeah,
back.
fine.
It also begs the question, does Dorian need gold? And if so, why? Because the quote says he hadn't just ventured to find a champion to win gold, which to me implies winning gold and getting away were two goals that he had in mind.
Does he think he's going to run away? Like take the gold
I-
and run? Put the money in the bag and he stole the key? That
Yeah.
was the last time you ever saw me.
That's what I thought too. I was like, are you trying to run away, sir?
Yeah. You keep hitting your desk.
Yes, I'm trying to stop.
You can use your hands. Just don't slam them.
No, it's I'm not even slamming. It's just like I graze it with my fingernail.
Just have better dodging skills.
I'm sorry. I have no hand-eye coordination.
So a little bit more on the topic of perception. Quote, "Dorian stuffed his hands into his pockets. Don't you find the title a little ridiculous given that our champions are no more than criminals?" And I think this is a good moment to, take a step away from, just the feminine women idea of perception and look into this here too, that this entire competition is based off of criminals, but they are just calling them champions. And it's all about what side you're standing on,
Yeah, and what your end goals are and morals are, because champion implies goodness, implies morality, but the criminals are the ones who'll do anything to get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, isn't there something, sorry, I'm going to butcher this, but there's a saying along the lines of the rebels or the liberators are only the rebels, like if you win or something like that.
Yeah.
You're
yeah.
only you're only the underdogs if you win.
Or you're only,
essentially, you know what I'm saying, but like,
Yeah.
I'm not getting the right quote, but it's the idea of
Yeah.
if you win, you get to be liberator,
Mhm.
you were the rebels, you were the ones fighting the cause. And
Yeah.
I'll always remember I had a history teacher one time, and it was circa early 2000s or whatever, and they were saying, "Hey, a lot of other countries that go to war, or, have scruffs, I don't know, issues with America. America's the empire, they're the rebels." And
Mm.
it's literally just about perception,
Yep.
I
Yep.
don't wanna get into, who's killed who, but it's more about the idea of how you're viewing a situation depends. I mean, it's just all a matter of perception.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I completely agree. If the French Revolution had gone a different way,
Yep.
the proletariat would have been this, the squashed rebellion, and the royals would have been the good guys. But in fact, it was the opposite,
Yeah.
where the proletariat ended up overruling, killing all the royals, and
I wanna give one more example
sure,
because
go
'cause I'm in a
ahead.
Taylor Swift, mindset. I woke up with Down Bad in my head. Uh, it's she wears short skirts, I wear T-shirts, she's cheer captain, and I'm on the bleachers. Now, you're listening to that and you're saying, "Get it, girl, she sounds like a bitch." However, play it from the girlfriend's mindset, it's, "Hey, my boyfriend's best friend keeps trying to get with him."
Mhm. Mhm.
I'd be pissed off.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I completely agree. During the conversation between Dorian and the king, we learned that Duke Parrington's choice of competitor is named Cain. Now, Cain probably sounds super familiar. It is the name of one of the sons of Adam and Eve from the Bible, the Torah.
Sorry, that's just the way you said it from, I'm like, the remix, version of this song, I don't know, from the album Reputation.
Well, it's part of both Jewish and Christian
Yeah.
theology, right?
Yep, yep.
Cain kills his brother Abel because Abel was the favored brother who had the better crops. Whether or not you know that history, the connotations around the name Cain are probably well known to you as a reader, or well known to most readers. And what is happening here is it's a very obvious warning SJM is trying to give us that Cain should be feared and that he is going to be the most ruthless of all competitors. We also, in this conversation, see a theme that recurs throughout all of SJM's works, and that's the idea of the breeding mare. I love that this concept is focused on a male royal in this
Yes.
case,
Yeah.
similar to how Rune was the focus in Crescent City. The king tells Dorian, quote, "I will not have some peasant woman banging on the gate, wailing that you've broken her heart. I've toiled too hard and long to establish my empire. You will not complicate it with illegitimate heirs. Marry a proper woman, then dally as you will after you give me a grandson or two." It shows how little the king actually values or thinks of Dorian. Like, Dorian's only purpose is to make sure the royal line continues. And because this is only the second time we've been in Dorian's point of view, it creates, I believe, instant empathy for Dorian. Dorian is in this really shitty situation with a really shitty father who happens to be king.
Yeah.
And the king doesn't respect him, calls him silver tongued, has so much dislike for his son that it is no wonder in my mind that Dorian uses his charm on everyone else, because
Yeah.
he has no control over his life any other way.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. It shows some really horrible things. However, love some equality here. Control his reproductive rights too. If you're going to be horrible to everyone.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just mad. Maybe we don't control reproductive rights. All right, moving on. My anger aside, this is another example of why Selena and Dorian are attracted to one another, another mirroring. It's a similar method of control of men and women.
Yep. Great point. Speaking of control, the king also continues to want to control Dorian's interactions with Selena. Quote, "If you court Selena, the consequences will not be pleasant, not from her and not from me." Dorian responds, "And if I condescend to associate with her, what would you do, father? Throw me in the mines as well?" Now, I found this exchange to be a little confusing because I expected these sentiments, the idea of courting versus condescending to ascend, to be swapped, right? I expected the king to, like, if you dare condescend to associate with her,
Yeah.
and Dorian to be like, well, what if I do court her? Are you going to throw me in the mines?
What you gonna
So,
do?
right, exactly. I wondered why the perception of those interactions was flip-flopped from what my expectations were. And the only way I could explain it is that I think Dorian is trying to come across as uninterested and
Mm.
disgusted by the idea of courting Selena, so that his father doesn't expect Dorian to do that,
Yeah.
because he's like, well, Dorian made it very clear he's disgusted in this woman.
Yeah.
Overall, this whole entire scene confirms what we may have already started to suspect because of Dorian's attitude in last week's chapters. Dorian is not a favored son, and he's got a lot of manly anger towards his father.
Manly anger.
Or boyish anger. He's just,
I
he's angsty anger.
mean, understandable, because
Oh, yeah.
like at this point, his dad just straight up slaps him across the face,
Mhm.
and his father is literally shoving it against his face with his fist, but showing that Dorian only has a false perception of power. The fact that people listen to him, the fact that women bow down to him, it is only due to the power his father gives him. If he were to strip him from his princely title, it would go to his brother. And what use is Dorian at that point? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it's a reminder of that. Quote, knowing he'd only cause more trouble for himself if he stayed, the crown prince of Aderlin bowed silently and left his father, eyes gleaming with barely controlled anger. And it's the use of title, because it's a separation. The crown prince of Aderlin bowed. It's not Dorian bowed. It's both a way of separating from personal experience, that it's not Dorian who experienced it, it was the crown prince. However, it also shows that the crown prince was forced to bow.
Mhm. And it wasn't bow to the king, it was bow to his father.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, there's this interesting power differential in when SJM chooses to use titles versus not.
And I love this moment. I love that, in this moment, Dorian is a crown prince and his father's his father, not the king. And,
Mhm.
there's a lot of tension between the two.
Yep.
That was the first chapter.
I know. And we're an hour in.
Hour and like 5 to 10. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
We then move on to chapter 8, and we see from the start of this chapter that, if nothing else, Selena is consistent, and she continues to pay attention to her surroundings as an assassin might, based on our earlier perception of her. Quote, she'd managed to convince Kale to give her a tour under the pretense of extreme boredom, when in fact, she'd used every moment to plot a dozen escape routes from her room. In addition to this constant need to identify escape routes, identify where the guards are, she's also continuing to complain about the glass palace. Quote, only an idiot would walk in a house made of glass. Now, like we discussed earlier, glass, it's dangerous. It's easy to break into. It's easy to break yourself. It causes harm. It's not very stable or safe. Symbolically, as we also mentioned, Selena is hiding behind so many identities. She's not accustomed to being vulnerable, and being in a house made of glass where people can see into the house and where you could destroy the house with one wrong move, it causes a vulnerability she doesn't like.
Also, think about the year-long glass cleaners that have to work on that thing. Like that sucks.
I thought you were going to say, also, think about the year-long service of in mines in caves. The extreme opposite of
Wait,
being in a glass
what did
palace.
you think mines and caves have to do? Did you say caves?
No, because you said year-long, and she was a slave in mines
Oh.
and caves.
No, I'm just thinking about the poor glass cleaner that's dangling off of that thing 24/7, trying to keep the bird poop alone.
At least they're getting paid.
Think about how many birds fly into it.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem.
Like a giant glass castle that you can see through. You probably just have so many dead birds just lining up the streets.
That is sad. The birds don't deserve that.
No, they don't. You guys, it's okay. They just passed out. They're fine.
They shake it off and fly away.
They woke up. When it comes to this glass castle, though, there's a lot of larger themes surrounding it, and it's this idea of what seems wrong or what seems strong but is actually vulnerable. You can see the people inside. Where Amy's mentioned it, we've talked on it, and it shows that there's a visual of everyone, and the king has his eye on everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the little brother, Holland. Quote, Holland Havillard, upon finding his porridge burnt, had beaten one of his servants so badly that there was no possibility of it being concealed. The woman's family had been paid off, and the young prince shipped to school in the mountains. He's only 10. He's only 10 now.
Mm-hmm.
Which means he was probably 9 at that point. Or freshly 10.
How does a 10-year-old have the strength to beat a
Right?
woman?
And I get that the woman couldn't fight back.
Yeah.
But a 10-year-old having strength to do that, I don't know. This is where I'm just like, can't we just age them up by 5 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
A 15-year-old, I could believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess if he had like a fire poker, like something
just poked.
Well, no, I meant like this. I could see that
we
being
have 2
very
different
dangerous.
methods of attack.
I swing, you poke.
I'm just imagining a police officer. So this woman was beaten and poked. It's a lot of poking.
During Celaena's tour of the palace, they come across the clock tower, and the clock tower, in my notes, is menacing AF. It's
it's creepy.
Why do the bells sound like explosions? Please explain. Let me read this quote. They were silent for a few minutes before an explosion sounded nearby, then another. The clock finished its war cry. She'd never heard bells like that. It's ominous. It's supposed to signal to us that there is something very unnatural about this clock tower. The tower itself is also made of inky black stone with gargoyles perched on each of the clock's 4 faces, quote, soundlessly roaring at those beneath. The thick clawed finger of a gargoyle pointed at her.
Which is a shame, because gargoyles are supposed to, they were there originally in architecture to get away, like get evil spirits away. That's why they're scary, so that they can outscare the gargoyles. Also, think about gargoyles from Hunchback of Notre Dame, the animated movie. Those gargoyles were great.
Gargoyles are such an interesting choice, because I understand that they're supposed to scare away evil spirits, but really, in fact, they just scare the humans.
Only the weak. Amy is just nodding.
That was a judgment.
I was scared. I also lived with gargoyles for a long time. I didn't live with gargoyles. I am not Quasimodo. But like, having lived in the UK for a while, there's just a lot of gargoyles up in your business there when you're looking up in your business. No, no, I'm not Quasimodo.
I want to continue to describe the clock. Quote, the numbers were like war paint on the white face of the clock, the hands like swords as they slashed across the pearly surface. Now, symbolically, when I think about the clock tower, it comes across to me as very similar to the early description of the city of Rifthold. There's this white surface, but underneath it all, there's a lot of filth. There's, it's tainted. And here we're seeing a lot of reference to violence, to war, to battle. Symbolically, that should be triggering alarm bells in our own heads. Something sinister is associated with this clock tower and foreshadowing maybe the sinister intentions of the king, since for some reason, the king is the one who built it around Dorian's birth.
Coming back to this idea that just because it's on the nose doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
We're getting this imagery of this is very evil.
Yeah.
look out, this clock is bad. Maybe this will come back into play later.
Yeah.
And it's super in your face. It's not a bad thing. I think me as a reader, as a writer nowadays, if I was reading SJM's books now, I would immediately be looking for, okay, but there's actually something good inside of it, right?
Mm.
But I was trying to think of this in my head. I was thinking, is there something good in here? I can't remember. And I accept that this is just SJM, early author, early writing. And remember, this was written in 2012. I
Mhm.
think personally, I believe writing has really elevated since then as a genre. But just because it's saying, hey, it's evil, clocked, noted, thank you.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing.
No.
Later, Selena will also think, quote, she couldn't shake the feeling that those bulging eyes were still upon her. Again, it's just that ominous, that foreshadowing that there is something wrong with this and we need to keep an eye on it.
We also recognize that there are word marks here. See us in the breadcrumb section.
When Selena and Kale continue their tour, they happen upon the library, and Selena seems in awe of the stone dragons that adorn the library's entrance. Quote, Selena suddenly halted. What, she breathed, is that? She pointed at the 20-foot oak doors, her eyes widening at the dragons that grew out of either side of the stone wall. Four-legged dragons, not vicious bipedal wyverns like those on the royal seal. Given Selena's hidden powers, because we've read up to Heir of Fire and we know that she has hidden powers, I wonder if this vision of dragons, who I assume are fire breathers, kind of calls to her, is something that she feels connected to. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I also feel like this is a little bit of a breadcrumb. Wyverns represent the Havillard family, and they are not present outside of the library, which implies then that maybe this part of the palace, the stone palace, has not always belonged to them.
Yeah. And we're getting that clear distinction between dragons and
Mm-hmm.
wyverns, as Selena points it out. And one of these things is not like the other. There's so many Taylor Swift references I did not realize in this episode. However, I feel like we're going back to our roots. It's just kind of saying, hey, wyverns red, dragons not, which everyone uses their collective knowledge, because I didn't write that in the breadcrumb section, but get what I'm hinting to here. Wyverns red, dragons not.
Got it. We also have another breadcrumb during the conversation between Selena and Kel. Quote, the legends are that a second library lies deep beneath in catacombs and tunnels, which we're going to get to see, which is exciting, but just something SJM planting her breadcrumbs that she will realize later in the novel.
Yep. To continue talking about the library and to kind of come back to this idea of red, quote, compared to the sunlit hallway, the interior that stretched beyond them seemed formidably dark, but as she stepped inside, candelabras came into view, along with black and white marble floors, large mahogany tables with red velvet chairs. I'm overanalyzing. That's what I do. That's the whole point of this podcast, is to overanalyze. I want to point out here that, as we said, the library dragons, not the current ruling system. The current ruling system is red. So the one thing that's we're noting in here is red are the red cushions, indicating that red has been invaded into this room. It's not part of this room.
That's a great point.
Thank you. Kale asks, hey, have you been to the Terracin libraries? And she says, yes, when I was young, though they wouldn't let me explore. We're going to get more into the breadcrumbs section there. But in my initial read forever ago, I felt I don't know what issues I was going through, but I definitely was younger and I was just thinking, "Oh my god, okay, of course you like books." Like, "Oh, calm down here, babe. It's books. I've never seen books before. A library." I would have the same reaction. I don't know. I was going through my issues. But I'm realizing at this point that when she's looking at these books, when she's so enamored, mentally she is brought back to Terracin. She is brought
Mm-hmm.
back to her home, and reading represents so much more. It represents the home that she misses. So I was such an asshole when I read this the first time, thinking, "Oh, okay, calm your tits, babe. Like that,
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
isn't." I I've been into tons of libraries. It's fine. Uh, However, being older and now realizing that I was a dick, I can also appreciate that this is her being completely transported mentally back home.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I didn't think about that because my focus was more on the quote I'm gonna read next. I think that I wonder not I think, I wonder to what extent Selena is shocked that this library is so large
Yeah.
because of what she thinks. And this comes up when Selena asks Kale why there aren't any guards in the library. And he explains that they're of no use in the library. Selena thinks then, quote, oh, how wrong he was. Libraries were full of ideas, perhaps the most dangerous and powerful of all weapons. So, from the Marxist lens, this is a little on the nose. Knowledge is power. Yeah, we get it. But it makes sense that this awful king who's conquering all of Aurelia allows knowledge to continue to exist in his own palace,
Yeah.
a source of power that others could exploit. It's not surprising that Selena is shocked at its existence.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, and I remember this quote after the elections was brought up quite a bit, which as it should be, that people were arguing that books aren't political. Babe, it says it right here. Yes, they are. And I'm going to make a point in a minute about why that is. So before I get into that, I'm going to build this case that there's a continued control of knowledge, which is the control of power. And then Kale tells her, read, these books belong to the king. Or, yeah, these belong to the king, these being books. And Selena says, it's a library, isn't it? It's the king's property, and you aren't of noble blood. You need permission from either him or the prince. And here you can see that knowledge is power, knowledge is control. And that really kind of crescendos into this next quote where Kale tells Selena, reading is a bit out of fashion, I'm afraid. Why is it out of fashion? The king, the queen, they're the ones who set the trends. They're the ones who make it fashionable and not fashionable to read. So if they remove this trendiness of reading, you are now removing the gaining of knowledge and the possibility of people starting an uprising there, essentially. And I think this kind of plays into this idea of a glass castle, right? This, oh, we're so open. We have a library of 1 million books. Anyone can go in there and read. But if you do it, then you're not cool and we're going
Hmm.
to laugh at you. And you're going to be so embarrassed you have to leave.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Again, this is all about perception. If the public views that the king views that reading is out of fashion, they want to win the favor of the king, they're not going to engage. Unlike Selena, who is, the antithesis of this king, who does not agree with anything the king has done. I love this convalescence.
Merger?
Yes, of
Okay.
fashion and books,
Yeah, yeah.
where it's not literally fashion, it's not literally dresses, but the idea of fashion and trends being applied to
Yes.
books and Selena's love for fashion and how it makes her feel powerful. We have these two things that could give her power
Yeah.
that are being controlled by others.
It mimics one another, right?
Hmm.
Her love of fashion and her love of books, both of which are completely controlled. Yeah.
Yep.
So from the library, she goes back into, I think she's in her room at this point,
Hmm.
but she admires the piano that's there. Quote, instead of reading, she could perhaps use the pianoforte, but well, it had been a while, and she wasn't sure she could endure the sounds of her own stumbling, clumsy playing. Again, 20-something-year-old me who was an asshole initially read this and thought, dear God, like so you love everything. Pick one, as if people can't have multiple interests. But it just felt so pick me at the time of, okay, so she likes books and music. And I remember thinking, okay, and who doesn't? Okay, just I had issues. Anyway, in hindsight and analyzing this, I can see what this actually is, and that's a clue of her upbringing. right? Of
Yep.
course, a princess would have an extensive library that they can explore and read. Of course, a princess would have been taught the pianoforte. These are all signs and reminiscent of her upbringing. So, if maybe a 20 something year old me could have just chilled for a minute, I would have seen that.
Yeah, and seen it for the breadcrumb that it is, right?
Yep.
For a first time reader, it feels pick me. But when you know what her background is, it's like, well, duh, of course.
Yeah.
So, but it's SJM doing the work
Yes.
for that big reveal.
Yep.
We then get this exchange of letters between Selena and Dorian. Selena's asking for permission to read. Dorian's like, of course, here are my 7 favorite books. One of our listeners, Mandy_Silverman, pointed out that the letter writing and the banter is very reminiscent of ACOTAR, or dare we say, this came before ACOTAR. So ACOTAR was an enhancement of what we're seeing here.
You can tell SJM just really wish there was texting in this world.
Yeah. This would be great for texting.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm bothered by the use of letter writing in books, but it is a writing device. And whether you love it or hate it, authors will choose to use it for a specific reason. And in this case, and I think in the case that we saw in ACOTAR, it's about creating connection, especially for characters who maybe cannot be seen together or whatever the case is. In this case, it feels a little like, well, let me just read the quote. Never mind. Dorian writes this letter to Selena saying, here are 7 books I love. I hope you read them. He then ends his letter with this quote, I am not one inclined to sit through pages of nonsense and bloated speech, though perhaps you enjoy works and authors who think very highly of themselves. I thought this was hilarious because Dorian has already kind of clocked Selena's general self-confidence
Yeah.
and self-esteem. But it does beg the question for me. It would be a very easy thing for Dorian to say, no, you can't read. That's a way to control Selena.
Yeah.
On the flip side, he is, in fact, continuing to control Selena by giving her the books he wants her to read and he wants to talk about with her. Now, is it about control or is it about connection? Does Dorian crave connection to talk about these books with? Or is he forcing a connection with Selena to control her? And there are so many questions that I have.
Yeah.
And what was SJM's intent?
Yeah, I mean, and you also have keep in mind this is after his father hitting him, threatening him, and everything. So how much of this is him being rebellious to daddy? But in his note, he also says, "quote I command you to read these first, so that we might discuss them." The command, right? And I think what we're seeing here is that not only is knowledge power, but knowledge can be shared intimacy. And if Dorian has the knowledge of the truth of his dad, right? Dorian has a lot of knowledge. Being able to share that with someone, and also eventually I think he'll be able to shed his own mask and be comfortable with Selena, then and that's another form of knowledge of Selena learning about his true feelings and self. Knowledge is power, but knowledge is now intimacy. And I get that because I was comparing it to texting. And I think when you're writing, there's a lot more, you can be your best version of yourself, right? You're thinking about it. I think people are a lot funnier over text, which is hard because I feel like on dates with guys, sometimes I'll think that was not your personality. That's why you took 2 hours to write back. But I also know that I can be a lot flirtier over text. I would say much more flirty things over text than I would in person.
Yeah.
So
I've said some very bold things to my partner over text.
which if you were to say it in person, it's ooh, no, ew, don't look at me.
It's cringy.
Yeah.
I love that you're making this connection between knowledge and intimacy, because one of the biggest gripes people have about Selena Sardathian and Aelin as we continue the series is how much she keeps to herself.
Yeah.
And how much, if we translate intimacy, she withholds from people. So I love that
one person, which we're not going to name, but you can tell when there's someone that she'll have a lot of intimacy with due to shared knowledge.
Yeah. So I love that we're establishing it before even chapter 10.
Yeah.
in Throne of Glass. And that is going to become a recurring theme throughout the series.
Yep. Now, the next day, when Selena wakes up and goes to her balcony, she's there to enjoy the sun. Quote, Selena took a seat on the rail and waved at the guards with their crossbows aimed at her. At this moment, she's coming off as vapid. Again, she's just kind of saying, hey, boys, how's it going? And this is a weapon, perception, letting the guards think that she is chill. She's vapid. She can just casually wave at them. She's giving them a false sense of who she is. And she's using the fact that people underestimate her and judge her as a weapon. All of that, right? There's a lot of control of what she has here. There's a lot of this moment of strategy of the assassin here and an understanding. So then I have to ask myself, what the fuck is this next part? The women start to show up, and we know that's Kaltain, who we're about to see. Quote, the red skirts were the size of a tent, and her bodice was so tightly bound that Selena wondered if her waist were any more than 16 inches. I then tried to get a measuring tape to see what 16 inches was, and I thought, nope, I think that's my thigh or my calf.
Oh, no.
My thigh is way thicker than 16 inches.
Yeah. My calf is 14.5.
So my calf is probably closer to
16.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. There's an immediate sense of competition. Selena is threatened when she sees her. Immediately, she clocks the thinness. She clocks the red. Rather than describing her skirts as large, very poofy. I don't know. She describes it as a tent, which within itself you think circus, right?
Yeah.
And she's a clown. So the connections are being made there. And at this moment, I'm thinking, okay, does Selena see a threat in Kaltain, who embraces her femininity and is able to use it like a weapon because now she's seeing someone who is on the same playing field as her? But then Selena hears them talk. Quote, I don't need to worry, the woman mused. The prince's harlot won't be well received. His what? Perception is everything. None of this is new.
Mm-hmm.
Selena knew that this was going to be how she was perceived. She clocked that before she even got into the castle. Philippa's the one who also implied it. She called her his lady friend. And now we're seeing Kaltain call her like a harlot. I feel bad for Kaltain. I'm going to say that. Like I really feel for her in this episode. And her being this upset with Kaltain saying what everyone else has said, but in more direct language, it's not confusing to me. She's 18.
Yeah, and I think this also goes back to what she said about the other women when they were coming through the gates of the city and heading to the palace. Selena calls women ridiculous. It's a defense mechanism. And I do feel like that is kind of conveyed in her description of what Kaltain is wearing.
Yep.
Her dress is the size of a tent.
Her waist is impossibly small.
Yeah, her waist is impossibly small. Like, she doesn't take this woman seriously. And so for this woman to offend her is the bigger insult, right? Like, you're not worth anything. How dare you call me something that is so offensive, but that I've ignored when other people have said it. And so Selena kind of overreacts. She tries to harm/kill Kaltain by dropping a flower pot on her head. And like Jack said, maybe it's just a product of Selena being 18, or maybe Selena is accustomed to solving problems with violence.
I'm also wondering that maybe this is the first person, kind of like what I said was, which now registering what I even said, that Selena views Kaltain as someone on an even playing field. At least when it comes to this. Can Kaltain throw a punch? No. But when it comes to controlling and understanding the perception of femininity, Kaltain is the first person that she is looking at and saying, she knows what's going on. So it's almost, when Philippa says it, well, she knows, like, this is a silly woman. Can't believe that she's talking to me like this. Versus when Kaltain says it, it's now a threat because this is a woman who's on the same level.
Right. I mean, Kaltain, at the end of the day, is competition. And Kaltain is the embodiment of everything Philippa was trying to warn Selena about.
Yeah.
right? This is Selena's first true encounter with the competition on the femininity at the court level.
Yep.
And I wonder if some of her overreacting is a direct result of her being annoyed that she didn't see it coming.
Agreed.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy. Stick around for part 2, which airs on Thursday.
We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. We would also love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a future mini episode or a Patreon exclusive episode.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon or Venmo. But the best way to support us is to follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube. Post, share with your friends, like and subscribe at the handle Book Talk for Book Talk. Bye.
Did you see the question I did?
Yeah,
Did you make it better?
I did not. I thought it was fine.
Oh my God. I'm just impressed with myself. Surprised? This is part 1 of our that was a dying noise I made there. Okay.
Wait. Let me just fix this.
Where we'll cover chapters 7 through 10 for we'll chat blah 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 blah.
My new focus in life and in my wardrobe is quiet luxury. The things that are nice, that make me feel good, but I know are worth the money that I spent on it without being boisterous.
I've definitely noticed that I've been spending more time on elevating what I'm purchasing, and some of my favorite go-to items have been from Quince. That's because they offer a range of high-quality items, but with prices that are within reach and very reasonable.
They have 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50 and washable silk tops and dresses that I love to wear to work.
Quince items are usually priced between 50 to 80% less than other similar brands.
They work with top factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes and cut out the middleman in the process.
One of my all-time favorite cardigans is actually from Quince, and every time I wear it, I always get compliments of how cozy and how soft it is.
My favorite Quince item is this button-up washable silk blouse that I wear to work, and what I love about it is it's so versatile. I can pair it with a cardigan, I can wear it on its own, I can wear it with a blazer, and it always makes me feel good about myself.
Give yourself the luxury gift you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns.
That's QUINCE.com/booktalk to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK.